Well, good afternoon, everyone. Assalamu alaikum for those of you who have joined us from the Middle East. It's wonderful to see so many people here. This is actually a standing room only session, it seems, which indicates the level of interest that is now emerging in the investment community about what is happening in Saudi Arabia. I have never actually seen such a high level of interest and news flow coming out of this region. And so what we're going to be doing today is digging into why exactly there is so much focus on the region right now, what type of investment opportunities it offers, what that means for wider issues around the global financial system, in particular the recycling of petrodollars. Is Project 2030, Vision 2030, actually achievable or not? We have a lot to discuss. But first of all, I'd like to welcome a few words from His Excellency Khalid Al-Falih, who's the Minister of Investment in Saudi Arabia, the man who's charged with persuading you all to keep investing in the country. Over to you, His Excellency.
Well, thank you very much, Gillian, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, everyone. It's a great pleasure to be hosting you here in Davos. So welcome to Saudi House. This is the first year we do this, and I'm really delighted to see the great level of interest. But Gillian, the kingdom has become truly a convener of global leaders, not only just about what is happening in the kingdom. I'm glad to say that in almost every meeting that we convene in the kingdom, whether it's the FII, the World Investment Conference that our ministry hosted last week. We hosted the world's largest future minerals forum with 21,000 from around the world participating to talk about gaining access to critical materials and securing global supply chains. The downside about this panel is we only have 50 minutes. And we have such a great panel that have not only volunteered, many of them have changed their travel plans to be here to participate in this panel, addressing critical issues, addressing the business community and global economic stability, resilience, growth, and the underlining theme that has been a constant for the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, which is global collaboration. And if you follow the story and study the story of Saudi Arabia from the founding of the third Saudi state almost 100 years ago, you will find that from the beginning it was underpinned by global collaboration. Of course, the most known and famous evidence of this is the story of Aramco, one of the largest and, in my mind, the greatest demonstration of global collaboration, enabling global development by accessing the hydrocarbons that have fueled the development in Asia and the developing world, and of course the developed world, and have brought billions of people out of poverty into the modern age. The future is just as challenging and just as promising, and the kingdom is turning a page from focusing on hydrocarbons to being an enabler of the next set of businesses. So whether it's the green energy, you're going to find the kingdom home to one of the highest ambitions for greening not only our economy, but providing the molecules and the electrons from green energy that will fuel global development. Supply chains are an issue. We have the program for it, our Global Supply Chain Resilience Initiative, and we have coined a term called green shoring of global supply chain, and we will have a dedicated session with the movers and shakers of some value chains, primarily hydrocarbons, chemicals, but also metals and hard-to-abate industries in the ice house, the SABIC ice house, where we will address this. You think AI is going to be a critical one? Saudi Arabia is standing a number of companies by the PIF, by Saudi Aramco, and by others to create the infrastructure as well as the regulatory and legal framework for how AI will be managed. And we're investing in RDI, we're investing in innovation. Saudi Arabia today is number one in the Middle East by far in terms of venture capital going into deep tech venture, not just from the kingdom, but from around the world. And we are bringing pools of capital from around the world to address these global issues. As I mentioned with the Future Mineral Forum, the conversation wasn't just about Saudi Arabia. It was about how can we unlock all of these critical materials from the rest of the world. And we are, of course, investing heavily into our greatest resource, our renewable resource of human talent. I hope through your presence here, you've seen some of our great young men and women who are innovating, who are daring. So I want to leave the rest of the time to the great panel we have with us. I'm a student of some of them and a friend of them all, and I'm so glad that they all came under the great stewardship of one of the greatest minds, the provost of King's College of Cambridge, but also the key columnist within the FT. At least that's the way I look at it. So thank you, Gillian, and thanks to the panel, and thank you all for your attendance.
Well, thank you very much indeed, His Excellence Shukrat. I should say, in some ways, you've not been ambitious enough, because you should have had a much bigger room, given the amount of people who are here today. But in a nutshell, one of the things I find fascinating, as someone who's looked at financial flows for many years, is that for a long time, the kingdom was viewed as a source of capital for the rest of the world, the recycling of petrodollars. What's happening now is essentially you're putting out your shingle and pitching for money to come into the kingdom to invest there, which of course raises questions about what that means for petrodollars. But anyway, we have a great group to talk about why and how the kingdom does or does not seem attractive. At one end, someone I've known for many years, Mark Wiseman, who's a senior advisor to Lazard, is representing the Canadian investment world today. We have Victor Chu, who is founder and chairman of First Eastern Investment Group, who's been long one of Asia's leading private equity groups, and I very much want to hear about why you're looking at the kingdom now. And we have, last but not least, next to me, Marco Arcelli, who is from ACWA Power, the CEO of that, which is very involved, as the name suggests, on energy and infrastructure. So let me start with you, Victor, and ask you, as someone who blazoned your career, made your career by investing in private equity in Asia, why are you looking at the kingdom now? And when you look around the world with all the geopolitical upheaval and economic uncertainties, how do you see the kingdom fitting into the ecosystem around the world today? And are you invested in the kingdom? I should ask you that first, for full disclosure about where you sit with this. Do you have skin in the game?
No, we are very interested to invest in the connectivity between the Gulf, particularly the kingdom, and Asia Pacific, particularly with the Greater China region and Japan. And because the ambitions of the kingdom means that we need to have the connectivity in scale. So not just in financial investment flow, but the flow of people, ideas, and capital that requires a bigger capacity of logistics, whether it's flights or whether it's through shipping into and out of the kingdom. And we are looking specifically in those areas. Secondly, I think the capital flow means increasing liquidity both ways. And I think in the next few years, liquidity is the name of the game. In a world, on an era beginning with today, we hope it will go very well. We have a new world leader who is going to bring new ideas, new challenges to the world. But there could be unpredictability going forward. And the kingdom, as you said it, is a place where is acceptable, neutral to both East and the West. And the infrastructure experience and the experience in the last 40 years in the Greater China region has something to offer to the kingdom in its infrastructural needs. So that's why we believe fundamentally there's a great opportunity to connect much closer between Asia and the Gulf region, particularly the kingdom.
Right. I mean, I'm fascinated by that because for two reasons. Firstly, to my mind, one of the most interesting developments in global capital markets recently was that China issued a $2 billion dollar-denominated bond in the kingdom, which was actually priced pretty much at the same level as treasuries. That was a poke in the eye to Washington by China, but it was also an indication of the strengthening relationship between the kingdom and China and the rest of East Asia, Southeast Asia. Secondly, I was just in Singapore recently, and there's a huge focus in Singapore right now on the kingdom. So the question I have for you before I turn to the other two is, do you think that actually when it comes to these people flows, infrastructure flows, financial flows, in fact, the Eastern axis will end up being much stronger than the Western one, given that you represent the Eastern axis when you're not in charge of UCL in London?
Well, higher education too, I should say. Both Cambridge and leading institutions such as UCL, we are increasing our collaboration with the Kingdom and the Gulf, as you know. I think it will be both. I think the international financial centers of New York, London, Singapore, and Hong Kong, and indeed Tokyo, we are quickening our product and innovation so that we can bring petrodollar into more diversity of revenues, and also the huge saving in Asia, particularly those coming out from China, could also look at the potential that the Kingdom and the Gulf presents. So it's both ways, but it's very exciting.
Right. I'm going to come on later and ask you about what you think the government could or should be doing to ease all this. But Marco, I'd like to turn to you and ask you, given your focus on energy and infrastructure, until very recently, the region was discussed almost exclusively through the lens of fossil fuels. Do you believe them when they say they want to be the pioneers in green tech? And are you involved in that yourself? Are you investing?
We're doing it. So to give you an idea, Saudi Arabia has one of the most ambitious decarbonization programs in the world to take out 270, roughly, million tons of CO2 by 2030. That's almost the size of the emission of a country like Italy, to give you an idea, all of it. And it's doing it through a number of different things. We're involved first in power generation. And the goal there is basically to turn power generation from oil-fired to 50-50 renewables and gas-fired. I'm very grateful that Aqua Power, our company, is tasked by PIF to deliver 70% of these renewables, which is about 14 gigawatt per year of the 20 gigawatt that every year Saudi Arabia is building. To give you an idea, today we have 3 already in operation. We have 17 under construction. We're going to be awarded another 13 in the next few months. So that gives you an idea of the acceleration and the speed. Today we have $30 billion of projects in construction, which means the size of a major oil and gas company, a BP or a Shell, to give you an idea. But it's most of that, 80% of that is renewables. So that's one thing that we're doing. The second is we're driving efficiency. So desalination is very important in Saudi Arabia. And actually, not just for Saudi Arabia, and a lot of countries are discovering it. When I grew up in Italy in the 70s, we used to have water rationing every September at the end of the summer. So we see that today this is increasingly a new theme. We just were awarded a project in Azerbaijan. We're discussing in Senegal. So we're going, and China, by the way, we're growing outside of the Gulf. It's becoming a big thing. So there, what do you do? And it's actually part of the resilience. We are taking efficiency. So while it used to take 15 kilowatt hour to produce 1,000 liters of water, it takes us now 2.7. So 80% reduction. We're driving it down to 2. So another 30% reduction. So all that and the reconversion that we're doing at some of the plants is coming together basically to reduce emissions. The third one that I would like to mention is how you see that a lot of different things, the Saudi Arabia under Vision 2030, how they all come together. And actually, on a personal basis, that's what attracted me to Saudi Arabia. If you have not read Vision 2030, I really recommend it because it's the best plan of a transformation of a country, but it could be of a company or whatever that I've ever seen. So we're developing the infrastructure in Red Sea Global, which is a new tourist destination, a lot of hotels and the camps of the service people there. So we're doing the power generation, the desalination, we're doing the wastewater treatment. So all that is off-grid. It's 500 megawatt of renewable power facilities. But what I loved about this solution is the wastewater treatment. So the wastewater, so basically the residue from hotel rooms and all that, they go to this facility. It percolates in these membranes that, by the way, are plastic, so made out of oil. So a higher level use of the oil under the oil sustainability program. It leaves the nutrients, and we make mangrove forest, wetlands of mangrove. And the residual water goes to feed the nursery where we're growing 30 million plants and bushes for the landscaping of the desert. So that is turning a desertic area into a green area, and it's part of the Saudi Green Initiative to plant 600 million trees by 2030. So what I really love about the country is not just what we do, but how everything comes together, and there's an ecosystem that is trying to push it.
Right. I mean, I think we could do with some of that in Cambridge University, frankly, because those of you who don't know the UK infrastructure system or the state of Britain today, one of the biggest single impediments for Cambridge to grow as a city right now, with all its amazing life sciences and quantum know-how, is they can't build enough houses fast enough because they don't have enough water supply in a country where it rains all the time. Go figure. So I've often joked to them that actually what we need is a bit of desalinization from the nearby sea to get a sort of hurry up of that. But anyway, so, but the question I have though is this. You know, until very recently, Europe was seen as being the leader of the green tech revolution or the green revolution. Then it looked with the IRA under the Biden administration that America was going to really jump in with all those incentives. Now that the US appears to be backtracking from that, at least on the official policy-making side, some people are saying that China is going to be the new leader in green tech. But do you think that, in fact, the Middle East region could end up being another contender for one of the key engines for green going forward, essentially replacing America?
We at ACWA Power are working hard to turn Saudi Arabia from the biggest exporter of oil to the biggest exporter of desalination and green technologies.
Well, competing with China on that one as well, but yes.
Well, they're another scale.
Okay.
No, but I tell you how we do it, really, because Europe, I really think that it's a beacon of ideology and has pulled the rest of the world to follow this ambition to decarbonize, greenify, make the world more sustainable. And they realized at some point now with the CBAM, the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, that it's not sufficient to do it in Europe because Europe is becoming negligible in the overall world with the growth elsewhere. So how do you drive it? You put kind of a barrier where if you don't decarbonize outside, then you're going to be subject to a tariff. So you're pushing this ideology through economic means. And that is the role of Europe. So a lot of the initial industrial evolution and technological evolution was there. Then, of course, as you need to develop that and the market, the scale is bigger, that's how China and other countries scaled up much quicker and now became not only for export, but also in China to decarbonize the system. What we do in Saudi Arabia, what ACWA Power does, and that's not my merit, it's a 20-year-old company and it's really throughout this period. What I see is it's a company, by the way, petrodollar, I don't see. You know, we have to go to banks, we have to earn our money. So
you're basically really getting external financing rather than...
Also from Saudi Arabia, from Saudi banks, but from EBRD, from JBIC, from commercial banks from the US, from Europe, from partners. So our business model is we project finance, we bring partners. So for every dollar that we invest, we mobilize 10. That's the first thing. So we are a catalyst of decarbonization by bringing the best to the projects. What we bring is not just on the equity, on the financing, but it's on the technology. So we go around the world, we scout the best technology. I think it's futile today to say, I want to be the leader in solar panel manufacturing or wind turbine. That's gone to China. So what we have to do is we work with China. Then we say we want to do desalination. Where are the best membranes? Japan. So we go to Japan and we take them. And we go to the US. And we go to Fraunhofer here in Germany for nanotechnologies to reduce the amount of sand that stays on the solar panels, or cleaning and working in high temperature. So we scout and we bring the best technologies, the best research centers, the best partners to bring always the best solution. And that is where it's interesting, because we cannot patent the solution. You build a plan with the best, tomorrow someone else can copy it. So we need to continue go and run. And that's why I'm saying what we're doing is we're bringing this expertise to Saudi Arabia. We test it with the pilots, academic institution like KAUST, KAXT, and all these. And then we install them here and we re-export. So today, 40% of our business is international. And we don't work in Europe, we don't work in the US, we work in the emerging markets. So where 85% of the new capacity is needed, not for ideology, not to decarbonize, but to support and elevate the living condition of people. There's an Italian journalist, he came to Arabia, we showed him all these, he went back, he wrote this book, The New Arab Empire, where he said, I quote him, he says the stabilizing effect that Saudi Arabia through this is doing around the world is impressive. And I really believe it.
Well, they haven't yet produced a Belt and Road project, but and I think the word empire is probably going out rather out of fashion these days, but certainly the international ambition is very striking. Mark, I'd like to bring you in because, we've known each other for many years, and it was only a few years ago after the Khashoggi killing that many North American funds and investment groups were making a public play of, if not withdrawing, then at least absenting themselves from the stage for a while in the Middle East or in the kingdom. Now I see a rush of funds from North America looking to get involved in investment projects. Can you explain why?
Yeah, well, I think the explanation is very simple. Saudi Arabia is a highly attractive and investable market today. And as capital moves around the world, seeking the best risk-adjusted return, Saudi Arabia has become very attractive for two simple reasons. The first reason, and it goes to what Marco was speaking about, is that the industrial complex that is being created for the world in Saudi Arabia is attractive to global investors. And so you just have to look at the recent green hydrogen project that's being financed by Air Products and Maersk, or some of the projects that Aqua Power is working on. These are very attractive projects that make good economic sense for global investors as they view Saudi Arabia as a provider of energy, of hydrogen, of sophisticated parts and technology to global markets. And it's an attractive place because, global investors are able to put that money to work. That money is often invested beside Saudi entities with the support of the government, and it makes the return on a risk-adjusted basis very, very attractive. And investors are looking around the world, and it's harder and harder to find places to deploy capital where your capital is, reasonably safe, and you're reasonably assured that you're going to make your expected return and something's not going to derail you, particularly over the length of time that these types of industrial products take. That's one. And so that's very, very attractive. But not to be missed is the second point. And the second point is that, bluntly, the Saudi economy has become a real economy. It's an economy of approximately 30 million people. GDP per capita is increasing rapidly, faster than almost any other developed country. It's a young country. consumers want to spend in the country. And so Saudi Arabia itself has become a very attractive market in terms of just domestic consumption. And so you're seeing huge success of global brands, global products, global consumer products moving into the region, but also the rapid development of, and because the economy is large enough, unlike most of the other economies in the GCC, this is a very large economy with a large indigenous population to Saudi Arabia. And so you're seeing also the development of Saudi brands that are not only winning share in the Saudi market, but I believe will soon compete globally. So if you go to Riyadh today, and this wasn't true even 5 years ago, you can go to some of the best restaurants in the world, and they're not just those that are replicas of the US, but also Saudi restaurants started by Saudis that I believe will not only take on that market, but will actually expand beyond. So I think people who think about Saudi Arabia today and investors who look at the market, it's investable for both of those reasons. And functioning stock market, functioning banking system, rule of law, credit markets, and the ability to enforce credit that is becoming more and more proven and reliable. And institutional investors, be they Canadian, European, US, value that in a world today where that's less and less certain, even in markets where we tended to think that there was predictability, and it's turned out to be less predictable.
Right. Well, I'm going to come on and talk about the flows and the investment points in a moment. Before I do, though, is the Khashoggi factor still something that your clients, your investors ask you about?
Look, I think everybody wants to know what is going on with geopolitics in the Middle East writ large. It's obviously a very important part of the world for a lot of people. The more stability, the more predictability, the longer that stability, predictability, and rule of law continue, led by countries like Saudi Arabia, by countries like the UAE, the more confidence that investors will have. If there's unpredictability, if the rule of law is seen not to apply, that will shake the confidence of investors. But I think if you look sort of at the direction of travel in the kingdom, and I would say in the Middle East broadly, the more that there can be stability, the more that there can be peace, and the more that there can be predictability and the rule of law, the better off that everybody will be.
Right. Well, I want to come back to that point in a moment. Before I do, though, I'd like to ask you all, we've had some good news out of the Middle East in the last 48 hours with hopefully the ceasefire, hopefully some kind of hostage return situation. But there's obviously a lot of uncertainty in the arena. And obviously the kingdom does play an important role in terms of where that's going. Can any of you, maybe Victor, are you concerned about the threat of more upheaval, geopolitical risks infusing the region and essentially derailing all of this progress?
Well, we're on the first day of a new administration in Washington.
Yes, I was going to come on to that in a moment. I had noticed.
And
yes.
I think the first 100 days will probably give us more clarity. But from what the sound bites we hear is that there's a lot of effort and interest to get things right, not just in the Middle East, but in other parts of the world. Because it's good for everybody. We need economic growth in order to maintain the momentum that many countries have embarked upon in this vision, including Saudi Arabia. So I think we need to be cautiously optimistic.
Right. Marco, does the regional political instability, the threat of war, concern you?
Not really. So we had certainly disruptions on the supply chain on the Red Sea at some point, but I think that those are well managed now. For the rest, honestly, I see the region, if you say the peninsula, let me say, really today a beacon of stability around the world. And I think Saudi Arabia in particular, I think driven by Vision 2030 and all the change, cultural, social, economical, the level of energy, enthusiasm, and hope about the future overrides any of the external factors that you may have. So honestly, when I come to Europe, I see gloom. When I go to China, they're a little bit worried. You know, in the US, certainly they're wondering now, but really, the Middle East right now is an area where you want to be.
Right. Mark, I mean, obviously everyone is trying to work out what the new president of America is going to do. As a Canadian, you have particular reason to wonder about that. You're a very interesting flank position, being sort of an insider-outsider. To what degree are you expecting potential American isolationism to boost the attractiveness of the kingdom? How do you see the new president impacting on the wider investment climate going forward? I mean, you spent many years analysing both Wall Street and Washington, and I say you have a very interesting insider-outsider position right now in terms of North America.
Well, look, Julian, I think that it's it's we'll see is part of it. I would say a couple of things. I've almost never seen in my career a greater degree of confidence than the United States has in itself today. And that's not just inside the Beltway or around Mar-a-Lago. That's around corporate boardrooms. That is for consumers. And so I think we should all expect, at least for the short to medium term, that American exceptionalism is going to continue. And if anything, be fueled by this administration. So I wouldn't bet ever, and especially now, against the United States of America.
Although history does show whenever a country is full of hubris, that's usually the moment for a sell sign.
Well, I'll take the other side of that.
Or Japan, look at, I studied Japan for years, so, Japan at the peak of the bubble.
Well, that's what makes a market, Jillian, so I'll happily I'll happily take the other side of that of that bet. But the other thing I'll say is, so that is sort of endogenous, let's say, to the United States. I also, though, believe that the era of multilateralism, as we've known it, if it's not dead, it's at least going to be in hibernation. And what that means is, I think all of us have to think very differently about multilateral institutions, be it military multilateralism, be it business, trade, human rights, etc. I think we've moved into a world, at least for the time being, that is going to be much more bilateral in nature. And so what that means is that from an investment perspective, I think you have to think less about regions and more about individual countries. I think as you think about asset allocation, I'll put it very simply. I mean, as you think about emerging markets today, and you think about an allocation as an institutional investor to emerging markets, you can't think about it that way. China is very different from Saudi Arabia, is very different from Brazil, is very different from other markets. And so investors today, I think, have to think bilaterally in the way that they approach their portfolios and really take a deeper level. And you go back to the example of North America, there's probably never been a greater divergence between the Canadian economy and the U.S. economy as there is right now. And those who follow such things, you'll see, Canada's in recession, the U.S. Isn't. Canada has productivity decline. The U.S. has the opposite. And so I think we have to really start to understand that we're moving away from a multilateral world into a multi-bilateral world in every aspect: business, politics, investment.
Is that a polite way of saying that the wonderful acronym BRICS is now dead?
I think it's been dead for a while.
Victor, would you agree?
Well, we talk about global collaboration here, right?
Yes.
So I think the next few years we have to be more strategic and look at things, how things develop out of Washington. But I don't think we should give up on multilateralism, because the multilateral framework, not necessarily individual organizations, obviously everything can be improved. I think it's the least discriminatory on a worldwide basis, particularly for the small and medium-sized companies and small and medium-sized economies. So I think the spirit of that, we have to keep it alive. But how to react to the market is something, as an investor, I think Mark does some wisdom in that.
Right, right. I mean, in terms of what you expect governments to do in terms of making themselves more attractive as an investment destination, I mean, we have, obviously, if you're right, Mark, we have this incredible sense of confidence in America today that will continue. We have this gigantic sucking sound from America, and essentially it's trying to suck growth out of the rest of the world, and they're increasingly explicit about that. And they're trying to suck growth out of, even partners and allies, and even places like the Kingdom. I mean, America will be quite happy if the Kingdom just carries on bubbling along for the next few years rather than booming. It doesn't want to be competing as an investment destination. But I'm curious, what does that mean in terms of what the government should or should not be doing now? What do you want to see from the government of the Kingdom?
So if I look at the two biggest countries in our portfolio are Saudi Arabia and Uzbekistan. And Uzbekistan I would have never placed on the map for energy transition.
I did my PhD in Tajikistan, so I happen to care a lot about Uzbekistan and Tajikistan.
No, because it's relatively small, and so I started to reflect on it, and I think that there is a commonality between the two, and it is leadership. So you have a leader who's visionary, who gets around him great people to deliver the vision, speaks to investors, so there's an open dialogue, constructive, to say what you need, what we can offer, because as a country you cannot offer everything, and as an investor you need something. And then you take quick decisions. So these three elements, so the vision, the dialogue with investors, and the decisiveness are the key elements, which are leadership at the end.
Are there any things that the Kingdom is not doing right now that you wish it was?
Give people sleep. There's too much going on, really, honestly. So sometimes I wonder, of course, everything is driven by Vision 2030. There's a big element of a deadline, let me say. But then there's now Expo. Then there's the FIFA World Cup. So there's always a new one, more or less in the same time frame. So sometimes I wonder, maybe we should rebalance a little bit. But I think that is what is going on. And not just because, really, a lot is going on, but because we need to make sure that the supply chains remain intact. And we are looking at that, we're working on that, and I think that slowly some adjustments are happening which are very positive.
Victor, what would you like to see out of the government in the Kingdom, Saudi Arabia?
I think the Kingdom...
And what are you not seeing that you want to have in there as well?
I think remains open, dynamic, enlightened, which is what they've been doing. And as you say, they have a very enlightened vision. The implementation with skills is quite impressive. I think I would like to see even closer connectivity with the East as well.
Right. Yep. You think they're too focused on the West, or you think Eastern investors haven't yet woken up to the opportunities?
No, I think the Kingdom's experience and connection with the West is well established. I think the connectivity with the East, both ways, the East with the Kingdom and Kingdom with the East, there's a huge opportunity to strengthen.
But before I turn to Mark, I'd like to ask you the practical question, which is that, do you think that the Kingdom can carry on walking the tightrope of trying to be best friends both with China and with the US? Because that's a pretty slippery tightrope these days to be walking on. And, it's possible that Washington may not welcome rising connectivity, as you say, between the Kingdom and the East.
Well, the Kingdom has a lot of bargaining position that can make up its own mind. And I think the good thing is China is not asking anybody to take sides, right? I think that's the difference. China's position is that it like to work with everybody, including America, of course, right? But certainly with our friends in the Middle East.
Well, I think at the moment Donald Trump is definitely taking sides wherever he can, but we don't yet know at all what that actually means in practice, so much awaits to be seen. But Mark, from your perspective, if Vision 2030 is actually implemented, it's going to potentially suck a lot of capital out of the world's financial system. It can't be internally financed. And so going back to my earlier point about how we saw the kingdom as a source of petrodollars to be invested elsewhere, and that's what's been happening and propping up the treasuries market, propping up so much of the US asset base for a long time. If the investment needs are as big as they look on paper, we could start to see some of that reversing and changing. What kind of impact is that going to have on the American capital markets going forward and, say, the demand for treasuries?
Yeah, so let me start by saying that I'm going to answer this question and then leave, but it's nothing that anybody said. I have to actually moderate a panel down the road in 10 minutes.
That's a perennial challenge in Davos.
So I'll be the classic Davos panelist.
We'll keep you on the stage in a hologram form.
But look, the first thing I would say about Vision 2030 is that in many respects the voyage is as important as the destination. I think it's reasonably clear that everything won't be accomplished. Any plan of that scale doesn't get everything accomplished on time. And I think the one piece of advice I would give to the kingdom is keep in mind first that the voyage, all the reforms that have taken place, all the changes that have taken place, both economically and socially, that voyage is as important as 2030, 2031, 2032. It has irreversibly changed the country for the better. And as long as that path continues in terms of the creation of capital markets, an exceptionally good job has been done in equity capital markets. More needs to be done. And I've talked to the minister about this in terms of debt capital markets and building a more robust debt capital market. Saudi Arabia will win its fair share or more than its fair share of global capital. And the one thing the world is not short of is capital. There's more than enough capital to go around. If you build the mousetrap, the world will beat a path to your door in terms of allocation of capital. And I'm not particularly worried that investment in Saudi Arabia is somehow going to have a detrimental impact on the United States of America or global capital markets generally. So what the world needs is efficient markets, efficient projects that are competing against each other. That's what makes them efficient. And if Saudi Arabia can play a role in that and introduce competition for capital, that is a good thing.
And can I very quickly ask before you leave, so what exactly are the issues around the debt capital markets? Because the equity markets, as you say, have really matured quite notably in the last few years. The debt capital markets are not. So if you had a wish list, and presuming that we do, of course, have His Excellency here who can pass on your wish list to the relevant people, what exactly are the reforms you need to make the debt capital markets fly?
Yeah, I mean, there's two things. First of all, Victor, at his first set of comments, talked about liquidity. So there just has to be sufficient scale and liquidity in the markets to allow capital to flow in and out efficiently. And then the second is a continuation down the path. In the world of debt financing, it's all about making sure that you get your money back in any circumstance. And so it's continuing to move the laws, the rules, the courts, the implementation of those rules in the kingdom, particularly as it relates to bankruptcy, to be efficient and fast moving. That gives the United States of America, by the way, a massive advantage in debt capital markets. The fact that there is a court in Delaware that specializes in enforcement of credit is a huge advantage, even beyond the UK, which is stuck in I think some form of 16th century process. So look, I think just moving to create more liquidity and systems and processes to enforcement of liens. If you get that right, you've already got the projects, and you've already got, as I said earlier, a domestic economy that is, increasingly self-generating growth.
So how do you say Chapter 11 in Arabic? That's the question.
I'm going to leave that for you and run to my next panel.
Okay, right. Well, we can do that. But anyway, thank you, Mark. We just got a couple more minutes left. So I'd say, do either of you have any concluding remarks you'd like to make?
I just want to add one more point. In terms of development of the debt capital market, equity capital market in the kingdom, one issue is the family-controlled companies. And when one generation passed to next generation, there could be frictions in that succession. And we haven't in this area sorted out. There's no template that can ensure the smooth passing. So the rating agencies and the market may have a question mark. And that is something which needs to be looking at.
That's an incredibly good point because, of course, so much of the capital market analytical framework is based on the assumption that you don't have family companies with these complicated succession plans. Of course, East Asia has a long history in managing these types of issues. But do you see any sign of awareness inside the kingdom about the need to clarify these structures?
Absolutely, because there are a few live cases that is quite messy.
Right.
And I think they will probably set the stage for some templates for government to develop protocols so that people can anticipate those problems and try to make preparations before problems arise. And that would be good for the future of the capital market.
Well, hopefully they can avoid the kind of succession-style dramas that are unfolding in the American media world right now. But Marco, any last comments from you?
So I think the next 5 years are really interesting in Saudi Arabia because everything is happening. The country has clearly put a new narrative about itself in the world, around the world, that is being picked up. So what I noticed in the 2 years that I've been there, first was we don't know about it, then it was curiosity, and now there's action. And it's increasing and speeding up. That means that, say, 5 years from now, the government will not be interested in promoting or attracting or being whatever because it's happening by itself. So that's why I think that the next 5 years are really for investors the time to capture the opportunity to grow and scale fast in a country, as you said, with a big domestic demand in every field along the major shipping routes, who talks to everybody, so very low geopolitical risk, centrally located with a lot of local demand. That makes me, as CEO of Aqua Power, my biggest regret is that I have a full-time job here, because the opportunities you see from tourism to manufacturing, food industry, everything is immense. So my recommendation is capture the opportunity now.
Right. Well, thank you very much indeed for a fascinating discussion. I've learned a lot from it, and it's been really very interesting indeed. I guess my one takeaway is next year, if you do this event again, you need more seats. So thank you very much indeed to all of you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.